when I say the word vampire, the first thing that comes to mind, who was the first vampire in existence? I mean, my ex-wife must have modeled it after somebody. And so it begs the question, because we all know vampires aren't necessarily real. You know, we don't have any ex-vampires in the neighborhood. So the first person who was accused of being a vampire must have been one creepy son of a bitch. He must have been the equivalent of the ye olde cubicle desk cleaner. Hey, how you doing? Peering through curtains. Maybe a little snot dribble comes out and he licks it back up. You know, how far back does this myth go? What do we know about vampires? Well, let's talk about it. Vampire, der Vampir, Striggled, Chang-Shi, the Shroud Chewers. All are names based around the same mythical entity. The word vampire itself first started as a French and an English thing, and contrary to popular belief, the first vampire was not from a place called Transylvania, not even from Romania. In fact, some of the first traces of the word upir come from the places of Turkey, Germany, Hungary, and other assorted places in the European and the Asian continent. The Chang-Shi in China, as I mentioned earlier, which were known as demons that came and sucked the life energy out of you, as opposed to being a little, hey, do you like that? A little, eh. But the kind of vampire that was popularized and that we know of today, you know, the guy in the cloak, the count who goes, hey, these are called revenants. These are not demons. There's a big difference. Revenants are people who have returned from the grave to do, you know, nefarious and ill deeds. Demons are a different story. Sorry, Chang-Shi. This theme was popularized by a poem called Der Vampir in Germany. Essentially, it's a pretty long poem slash play of a vampire named Count Ruthven who sucks the blood out of some poor lass. And it was later adopted into a two-part opera, which is where, as far as I can tell, is one of the first instances of hearing the classic "Good evening" come from vampire lore. Ruthven is such an interesting name, by the way. It just sounds like the creepy guy who shows up to the party and spikes the great punch. And vampires are a pretty common trope throughout history. Now imagine this. It's the dark of night in your small European village of Esperor. I just grumbled. I was drunk. I just got back from the tavern. My town is called Esperor. And you're walking home. The trees are dark. The wind is blowing. And you shut the creaky wooden door to your small shack of a house where your wife and your kids all live in one room on one mattress. And they have to watch as you, the mom and the dad, try and have another son. I'm getting ahead of myself. And then suddenly, because there's not a lot of hygiene in these medieval towns, people start dropping. People just start fucking dying. People aren't brushing their teeth. People aren't washing their hands. And one day, they find old Judy in a cot, bleeding. She had caught some sort of disease, but the townsfolk of England did not know that. They attributed these things, these unseen forces that we know as bacteria, microbes, diseases, to evil creatures, monsters of the night. So vampires are very, very closely related to ye olde disease. And this was gone into depth in a book called Vampire Forensics by Mark Colin Jenkins. So Judy's dead, Bert has boils, and he's going next. You wake up one day and old Gerald is freaking, his neck's cranked and he's like, vampire alert! And a lot of monsters and stuff throughout history are just misunderstood phenomenon that we all know today because of modern science. One funny example of vampires, it comes from around the 1600s era. These were in Germany. And a lot of vampires weren't even necessarily known to leave their graves. Let's take Aunt Judy for an example, okay? One day, your old farm folk friend comes into the house and he's like, oh my God, I dug up Judy. And you go, what the fuck? I won't even ask you about that, but he keeps going. I dug up Judy, and she's been chewing on her shroud. Her shroud has bite marks on it, and it's in her mouth. I'm telling you, she's still alive. She's a vampire, I tell you. She's a shroud eater. In Germany, these were called Nachzergers. Sorry, I'm butchering this. I know, I don't speak German. Now, this had a pretty easy enough explanation. these shrouds covering dead people that were buried were just getting covered in purge fluid, which would cause the shroud to tear, shrivel, and kind of go into the mouth almost like they had been chewing on it. Holy shit, we got vampires! Needless to say, the shroud chewers or the Naxxers, whatever, were a huge ruckus in Germany. So much so that the Pope got involved because people were just digging up bodies and doing the stupidest things imaginable to get them from chewing on their shrouds. Some Protestant theologian douche told everybody through an article called The Chewing Dead, where basically the way to stop these chewing dead was to exhume the bodies and stuff soil in their mouths, a stone too, and a coin for good measure. First thing I want to know is how he came up with that very specific set of rules. Must have been having some yieldy mushrooms. So to that townsfolk who would have came in through the door and talked about old Judy, I would have turned around and been like, well, did you stuff soil in her mouth? Did you put the stone in there yet? Oh, I never thought of that. But because all these superstitious people were just digging up bodies in the towns and stuffing bricks and coins and soil in their mouths, Pope Benedict XV, I believe, came out with a declaration saying that vampires were fictitious fantasies of the human mind. Pope just shot you down, bitch. A random, weird, interesting fact about Pope Benedict XV is his name was actually Lambertini before it was Benedict, and he was born into the noble family of Bologna. I'm not making this up. Random history fact of the day. But the most famous vampire of all time, it goes without even saying, is Bram Stoker's Dracula, which was modeled after Vlad Tepes in the 1400s, which is interesting because Vlad Tepes was never viewed as a vampire at the time. It's a completely Western formulation. He was viewed as a Romanian hero for defending Romania against the Ottoman Turks. Now, Vlad III, who's commonly associated with being Dracula, was at an early age captured by the Ottomans and held as a prisoner high atop a cliff, a fortress. And not only was he kept in captivity once by the Ottomans, he was kept in captivity twice by the Ottoman Turks. So hatred and bile just filled his little gut. But his hatred was so intense that literally some of his enemies, there was rumors that he was cutting their heads off, drinking their blood, dipping his bread in the blood. I just did this today, except for with tortilla chips and chili. So I kind of see the appeal. Needless to say, Vlad the Impaler defended Romania from the Ottoman Turks in a brutal fashion, which caused all these rumors of him being a vampire, which Bram Stoker then took inspiration from to create the character Dracula, who lives in Transylvania. Kind of goes without saying that there'll be people in the comments going, Dredile, I'm German. If you had just come to me, I could have told you everything there is to know about vampires. Sorry for the terrible German accent, and not only that, but stereotyping. To those people, I say, have you tried the Great Punch? But one of the most soul-wracking and creepy things about Dracula or Vlad the Impaler is that we actually have pictures of his castle and where he used to walk. He's a real person. And just looking at these pictures freaks me out, man. Like, is this the headquarters of EA or something? Just look at them! There were many secret passageways, different rooms where people get boiled alive, and who knows, God knows what, but that is just creepy to look at. And it honestly sends chills down my spine looking at it, some of these images, knowing what went on there. And I can totally see some creepy fuck just walking through the halls. Who's next? So from inception, the myth grew. It spread all throughout Europe and eventually getting popularized by, as I said earlier, the French. Then it moved to England, where it got its very famous story, The Vampire. And then the first time we see vampire on film is the creepy vampire Nosferatu. Nosferatu is basically a blatant ripoff of Bram Stoker's Dracula, where essentially the word vampire was replaced by Nosferatu, and Count Dracula was Count Orlok. So because of legalese, Bram Stoker's Dracula, they got into a fight and they stopped all production of Nosferatu until it got released in America in 1929 against the wishes of that company, and it's since been regarded as a masterpiece and a classic of vampire history and lore. And one of the creepiest parts about vampires is their sex appeal. Well, I mean, except for this guy. Jesus, get him off the screen. Vampires are often regarded as sexy beings. You know, they're these tall, pale white men, and suddenly they're upon your bed, sucking the blood from your neck. And I'm not exactly sure where that originated from. What I want to know is, how do vampires even do the deed when blood doesn't flow? I mean, I know that the penis operates and gets very hard. This is getting weird, because blood is pumping and it rises. Maybe you have to suck blood first in order to get the thing going? But vampires are considered a very sexy thing. You know, there was a lot of very romantic novels about vampires, until eventually we get to the creme de la creme, Twilight. Twilight popularized sexy vampires and took it to a whole new stratosphere. Like, suddenly women want to get sucked off by a vampire. And it's just hilarious that we as a culture do this. I mean, when you look at things like the Charmin bear. I mean, bears are mean creatures. They will ravage you and rip your heart out and eat it in front of their newborn baby's cubs. Meanwhile, we have the bear on a piece of toilet paper. We wipe our butts with it. It's so cute. Vampires are terrifying creatures. I mean, just look at the difference between Nosferatu and Edward. I mean, we have Vlad the Impaler as Count Chocula on a cereal box. I mean, come on. The far evolution of vampire as it stands right now. True Blood, Twilight. We've seen kind of the direction the vampire myth has come. I don't necessarily think there is one place where we can say that guy is the first vampire. I don't think that is even possible. The myth is such a wide, over-encompassing like mythology and lore and folklore that it's just impossible to pinpoint that guy was the first vampire. But I mean, like, I don't know, and maybe we will never know. So if you like that lore, please leave a like and subscribe and all that crap. It's very encouraging to my nipples. If you want to see more of this stuff, please post it down below in the comments of what you'd like to see going forward, and I take those into consideration. Thank you so much for watching, and as always,